Hi, my name is Maggie, and my second case study is on microfinance lending in rural Kyrgyzstan. So for a little bit of a background, Kyrgyzstan is the second poorest country in Central Asia. If you're looking at poverty rates, some people use a line of $5.50 a day. If you use that, then there's around 60% of the country is impoverished. If you take the standard of $7.10 living a day, that number is probably a lot higher, probably 70% of people living under that line. And that's the metric that they use in the Matthews article. The poverty rate is the highest in rural areas, which is why I'm going to focus on it in this case study. And other things to note, market-based banking in Kyrgyzstan only first came around in 1991 after the Soviet Union fell. Before then, the banking system was the same one that all the Soviet countries used, and it wasn't really based on anything. So it completely changed after 1991. And then it's also important to note that microfinance really took off after 2002 in Central Asia, especially in Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan passed a law in 2002 that liberalized it and allowed these microfinance institutions to have a lot more freedom. So that's important to note about the background of the situation. So looking at microfinance, most of the microloans in Kyrgyzstan are between $500 and $800, and then most of these are spent on either agriculture or trading. The majority of microfinance goes on within impoverished populations or helping women. And then I found three main improvements that should be made in this area. First, around financial literacy, second, around inaccessible banking, and third, around female entrepreneurship. So looking at financial literacy, it's important to note that a lot of the rural populations operate in cash. In 2017, 89% of agricultural products were bought in cash, and not a lot of people use credit cards or debit cards. Even people that have bank accounts mostly just use it to withdraw cash on payday. So banking is not very popular there, which means that not a lot of people are able to know a lot about finance or saving. There's also a lot of distrust of banks in older generations. When the Soviet Union fell, all the markets got messed up and they lost all their savings. So it makes sense that they wouldn't trust banks. This is somewhat trickled down to the younger generations, although not as much. And then a lot of the entrepreneurship in Kyrgyzstan is motivated by financial necessity, since a lot of people live under the poverty levels. And so when we look at this week's readings, so in the reading by Bentry et al., they really focus on looking at the effects of microfinance on entrepreneurship, and then they didn't see as much of a correlation between microfinance and any increases in entrepreneurship. This wasn't the case in at Tunisia's study. They looked at programs in Mongolia where women were encouraged to build their own companies or invest in other companies and just generally get involved in entrepreneurial activities. And they saw an increase in entrepreneurship when looked at in the scope of microfinance loans. And so the takeaways from here that can be applied to Kyrgyzstan is that entrepreneurship really works when people are more motivated to engage in these types of activities. If they're just given the loan and left to their own devices, then they might not be as likely to benefit from it long term as when they're more financially literate and they know what's going on, they know about their finances. So that's kind of a something to note, that financial literacy will boost the productivity of microlending. So those two kind of go together. Another problem that needs to be addressed is inaccessible banking in Kyrgyzstan. So as of right now, microfinance is mostly rural. They mostly, as I said before, help with agriculture and trading. And then when it comes to the large banking, this is primarily urban. They don't really get into rural areas as much. It's costly and inconvenient to expand. Kyrgyzstan is like 95% mountains. So even just the physical expansion of a chain would cost a lot more and be a lot more difficult. So those two kind of remain separate, but that also hurts the rural areas because microfinance loans are relatively small. And so if they want to expand their business or go beyond it and find a larger loan, they're going to have to travel a lot farther to get that loan and to get to a physical bank. So that's not going to help their cause at all. And then one possible solution to this is digital banking. Although technology is mostly an urban thing in Kyrgyzstan, there's a lot of potential for digital banking. This would make it accessible even in places that are not easy to reach. A lot of times in the colder months, there's certain places that are hard to get to, hard to travel in. So digital banking would kind of solve that problem of making it accessible for everyone. And then there's also a study that concludes that technology is really good for productive microfinance. They looked at smartphones and microfinance loans, and they found that there's a positive correlation between people that have smartphones and people who are able to use these loans very productively. So that's something that could be expanded in digital banking, and that could lead to a lot of really productive behavior. So another thing to look at is female entrepreneurship. Right now, women are less likely to become entrepreneurs compared to men. And even though a lot of these microfinance programs could be geared towards women and impoverished communities, really the people that wouldn't have access to other forms of credit, even so, women are still less likely to be entrepreneurs, most likely because they don't have programs that really focus on women versus other parts of the community. So going back to our readings, and we can see this in the Banjari article, the programs included women, they weren't targeted towards women, and so they didn't see an increase in female entrepreneurship as part of their study. Whereas in the Atanasios reading, they specifically targeted women, specifically focused on that, and they saw a positive correlation between microfinance loans and women's entrepreneurship. So my takeaway from that was that if you develop programs that are specifically focused towards women, especially in joint lending programs, then this could increase female entrepreneurship as a whole, and this can be applied to Kyrgyzstan. And these programs could help this problem that they're having of not enough women becoming entrepreneurs. So the important takeaways from this, there are 3 main improvements that could improve microfinancing in Kyrgyzstan. First being financial literacy. There could be more targeted programs that allow people to learn more about their finance and banking, how they can save and improve themselves. There can be more accessible banking, such as digital banking, that would really benefit everyone. And then they can have specific microfinance programs that are geared towards women, which I believe would improve female entrepreneurship as a whole in terms of microfinancing. And it's also important to know that there's still a long ways to go. These 3 things alone won't fix it. There's still a huge problem with poverty in Kyrgyzstan, and microfinancing alone will not solve this either. These are very small loans, and there's very large problems that need to be fixed. These are just going to treat the symptom, not the cause. So that's it for this presentation. Thank you for watching.